In 1994, a 30-year-old Wall Street prodigy walked into his boss's office and said he was quitting to sell books on the internet. His boss, one of the most powerful hedge fund managers in the world, asked him to think it over for 48 hours before making the decision. The young man went for a long walk in Central Park. He thought about regret, not the regret of failure. He could live with that. The regret he feared was different. It was the regret of never having tried at all. He quit the next day. He packed everything he owned into a car, handed his wife a legal pad, and drove west across America while she took notes on a business plan he was dictating from the passenger seat. The company he launched from a rented garage in Bellevue, Washington, with a single desk made from a $60 door and 4 legs bought at a hardware store, would go on to become one of the most valuable corporations in the history of human civilization. His name was Jeff Bezos. And this is the story of how one man's refusal to live with regret changed the world forever. Welcome to Visionary Chronicles. Before he was the richest person on the planet, before he owned rocket ships and newspapers and the cloud infrastructure that powers half the internet, he was just a boy on a ranch in Texas, dismantling windmills with his bare hands and learning the most important lesson of his life. That self-reliance isn't a philosophy, it's a practice. Before Amazon was a trillion-dollar empire, it was a fire hazard. A crowded garage in the Pacific Northwest with extension cords running across the floor, cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling, and a bell that rang every time someone, anywhere in the world, made a purchase. In those early days, the bell rang so rarely that every employee would stop what they were doing and crowd around the screen to see if anyone actually knew the customer. What you are about to hear is not simply the story of a successful businessman. It is the story of a man who thought in decades when everyone else thought in quarters, who embraced failure as a prerequisite for invention, who looked at the early internet and saw not a novelty, but a nervous system for a new kind of world. It is the story of long-term thinking taken to its absolute extreme, of a philosophy so patient, so counterintuitive, so relentlessly focused on the customer that Wall Street analysts called him reckless for years, right up until the moment they called him a genius. Stay with us, because the most important lessons Jeff Bezos ever taught the world had nothing to do with e-commerce. They had everything to do with how you think about time. On January 12, 1964, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a boy was born to a teenage mother named Jacqueline Geese and a teenage father named Ted Jorgensen. His name was Jeffrey Preston Jorgensen. The world knew almost nothing about him then. Neither, in many ways, did his own father, who was just 16 years old when his son arrived, and would, within a few years, disappear from the boy's life entirely. When Jeffrey was 4 years old, his mother remarried. Her new husband was a Cuban immigrant named Miguel Bezos, a man who had arrived in the United States at age 15 as part of Operation Pedro Pan, a massive airlift that brought more than 14,000 Cuban children to America to escape Fidel Castro's regime. Miguel had arrived with almost nothing. He learned English. He worked. He studied engineering at the University of Albuquerque on a full scholarship. He became, by every measure, a self-made man, and he gave his stepson his name, Jeffrey Preston Bezos. Miguel Bezos would become one of the most profound influences on Jeff's life, a living embodiment of what relentless effort and long-term thinking could produce in a single generation. Every summer, young Jeff was sent to the sprawling ranch in Cotulla, Texas, owned by his maternal grandfather, Lawrence Preston Gies, a man who had once overseen 230,000 employees as a regional director of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. On that ranch, Jeff didn't just play. He worked. He repaired tractors. He laid pipe. He castrated cattle. He fixed windmills with nothing but hand tools and determination. His grandfather taught him that when something breaks, you don't call someone. You figure it out yourself. That lesson would echo through every company Jeff Bezos ever built. In school, Jeff was identified early as a gifted child. His curiosity was almost impossible to contain. At River Oaks Elementary School in Houston, Texas, he once tried to convert his bedroom into a full science laboratory. His teachers noted his obsessive focus. His grandmother noted it too, though with slightly more concern. On one car trip, after she made a comment about how many cigarettes a smoker was likely to consume in a lifetime, the young Jeff, then just 10 years old, calculated the precise statistical impact on her life expectancy and reported it back to her without blinking. He made her cry, she told his grandfather. His grandfather pulled him aside and said something Jeff would remember for the rest of his life. Jeff, one day you'll understand that it's harder to be kind than it is to be clever. He graduated valedictorian of his high school class in Florida and enrolled at Princeton University, where he studied electrical engineering and computer science. He graduated summa cum laude in 1986, was elected to Phi Beta Kappa, and turned down job offers from Intel, Bell Labs, and Anderson Consulting. Instead, he joined a financial technology startup, the first of many bets he would make on the emerging power of computing. The boy who dismantled windmills on a Texas ranch was about to start dismantling industries. By 1990, Jeff Bezos was moving through the corridors of Wall Street at a speed that alarmed even the people around him. He joined the hedge fund D.E. Shaw & Co., one of the most secretive and mathematically sophisticated investment firms ever created. Founded by David E. Shaw, a Columbia computer science professor, the firm recruited exclusively from the top of the academic pyramid: physicists, mathematicians, engineers who thought in algorithms. Bezos fit in perfectly. He rose faster than almost anyone in the firm's history. By 1992, at just 28 years old, he was a senior vice president. By 30, he was the youngest vice president in the company's history. He was earning a salary most people spend entire careers chasing. He had every reason to stay. Then he read a statistic that changed his life. In 1994, he came across a report stating that internet usage was growing at 2,300% per year. Not doubling, not tripling, growing by a factor of 23 every single year. Bezos later described the feeling as staring at something that could not be ignored. He began to think about what kind of business could be built on top of that growth curve. He made a list of 20 product categories that might work online. Books rose to the top. There were more than 3 million titles in print at any given time, far too many for any physical store to stock. A virtual store could carry all of them. The supply chain was simple. The product never expired. It was the perfect starting point for something much larger. He called it the regret minimization framework. He asked himself, when I am 80 years old, looking back at my life, will I regret not having tried this? The answer came instantly. Yes, he would regret it forever. Nothing else mattered after that. He told David Shaw. Shaw told him to take 48 hours to think it over. Bezos went home, packed his belongings, and resigned. In the summer of 1994, he and his wife Mackenzie loaded up a Chevy Blazer. Mackenzie drove while Jeff sat in the passenger seat with a laptop, writing the business plan for what he was calling Cadabra Inc. Their destination was Bellevue, Washington, chosen partly because of its proximity to a major book wholesaler, and partly because Washington state had a small enough population to minimize the sales tax burden on early customers. They rented a house. Jeff set up shop in the garage. He built his first desk out of a $60 door from a home improvement store and 4 wooden legs. That door desk became legend, and Bezos still gives door desks to employees today as a symbol of frugality and focus. Amazon, renamed after the world's largest river to suggest scale, launched on July 16, 1995. Within the first month, it had sold books to customers in all 50 states and 45 countries. In the first year, it generated $600,000 in revenue. Bezos slept on a mattress on the floor and personally drove packages to the post office in his Chevy Blazer. In May 1997, Amazon went public at $18 per share, raising $54 million. Bezos owned roughly 42% of the company. Wall Street was skeptical. The company had never turned a profit. Analysts called it Amazon.bomb. Bezos barely flinched. Then the dot-com bubble burst. Between 2000 and 2001, Amazon stock fell from a peak of over $100 to just $6. 90% of its value evaporated. Rivals collapsed by the dozens. Bezos stood in front of his employees and told them it was fine, that the stock price was not the company, that the company was the customers. He kept building. In 2006, he made what many consider the single most consequential business decision of his career. He launched Amazon Web Services, a platform that allowed businesses to rent computing power and storage from Amazon servers. It seemed bizarre at the time. What did a bookstore have to do with cloud infrastructure? Everything, as it turned out. AWS grew into the backbone of the modern internet. By the mid-2020s, it would generate more profit than all of Amazon's retail operations combined. In 2007, Bezos unveiled the Kindle, a device that threatened to do to books what the iPod had done to music. Publishers panicked. Customers embraced it. Within a year, Kindle books were outselling physical books on Amazon for the first time in history. Then came Prime, a subscription service that seemed financially irrational when it launched in 2005 at $79 per year, offering unlimited 2-day shipping. Analysts warned it would destroy margins. Bezos knew something they didn't. Customers who joined Prime spent more than twice as much as customers who didn't. Loyalty, he understood, was the most valuable currency in retail. He had been right all along. He was just willing to wait longer than anyone else to be proven so. By the early 2010s, it was no longer possible to dismiss Jeff Bezos as a curiosity or a gamble. Amazon had become something the business world had never quite seen before. A company that competed in virtually every commercial arena simultaneously, won in most of them, and somehow managed to reinvest its profits so aggressively that it appeared, on paper, to barely exist as a profitable enterprise at all. That was intentional. Bezos operated on a principle he called Day One. Day One meant the company should always behave like a startup, paranoid, customer-obsessed, resistant to bureaucracy and process for its own sake. The moment a company started acting like it had already won, he said, was the moment it began to die. Day Two was stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by death. He placed a sign in the lobby of Amazon's headquarters that read simply, Day One. He named his own office building Day One. In 2013, Bezos made a move that stunned the media industry. He purchased the Washington Post, one of the most storied newspapers in American history, the publication that had helped bring down a presidency during Watergate, for $250 million. He bought it personally, not through Amazon. He brought the same patient, data-driven, long-term philosophy to journalism that he had brought to retail. Under his stewardship, the Post's digital subscriptions grew from less than 100,000 to over 3 million. Meanwhile, his other obsession was pointing not at commerce, but at the stars. Bezos had founded Blue Origin in the year 2000, quietly, almost secretly, in Kent, Washington, with a singular goal: to reduce the cost of access to space and eventually enable millions of people to live and work off the Earth. He funded it personally for years, selling approximately $1 billion in Amazon stock annually to finance it. Blue Origin's philosophy, like Amazon's, was built on patience. Its motto, gradatim ferociter, step by step, ferociously. In July 2021, Bezos himself flew to space aboard Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket, reaching an altitude of over 66 miles, crossing the Kármán line, and becoming one of a small number of private citizens to have left Earth's atmosphere. He wore a cowboy hat when he landed. He thanked Amazon's customers and employees for paying for it. The remark was half joke, half profound truth. By 2018, Amazon's market capitalization crossed $1 trillion, making it only the second company in history, after Apple, to reach that threshold. That same year, Forbes estimated Bezos's personal net worth at $150 billion, making him the richest person in recorded modern history. He surpassed Bill Gates. He surpassed Warren Buffett. He surpassed everyone. Then, in January 2019, the world watched in astonishment as Bezos and his wife of 25 years, Mackenzie, announced they were divorcing. Mackenzie had been there from the very beginning. She had driven the car across the country. She had worked as one of Amazon's first employees, and she had watched her husband build one of the most powerful companies in history from their garage floor. Their divorce settlement transferred approximately $38 billion in Amazon stock to Mackenzie, at the time, the largest divorce settlement in history. Mackenzie Scott, as she became known after remarrying, immediately set about giving the money away with a velocity that stunned even professional philanthropists. Within 3 years, she had donated more than $12 billion to thousands of organizations across the United States. On July 5, 2021, Amazon's 27th anniversary, Bezos stepped down as CEO, handing the role to Andy Jassy, the executive who had built Amazon Web Services from the ground up. Bezos transitioned to the role of executive chairman. He had built a company with more than 1.6 million employees worldwide, a company that handled roughly 40% of all e-commerce in the United States, a company whose cloud division powered Netflix, Airbnb, the CIA, and thousands of the world's most important digital services. He had started with a door on 4 legs and a bell that rang when someone bought a book. So what does the story of Jeff Bezos actually teach us? Not, as it is sometimes reduced to, that you should quit your job and start a company. Not that garages are magic or that genius is inevitable. The lesson is both simpler and more demanding than that. The first lesson is the regret minimization framework, and it is more powerful than it sounds. Bezos did not ask whether his idea would succeed. He asked whether, at the end of his life, he would regret not having tried. That reframe fundamentally changes the calculation. Failure becomes survivable. Inaction becomes the real risk. When you optimize your decisions around the 80-year-old version of yourself looking back, the noise of short-term criticism and short-term loss stops having so much power over you. The second lesson is the willingness to be misunderstood and to be patient about it. For years, Wall Street analysts called Amazon reckless. They called Bezos naive. They called AWS a distraction. They called Prime financially suicidal. Every single one of those bets has been vindicated. But vindication did not come in a quarter. It came in a decade. Most people are not willing to wait a decade to be proven right. Bezos was. That patience, more than intelligence, more than capital, more than timing, is what separated him from the crowd. The third lesson is that invention requires failure as its raw material. Bezos famously said that Amazon was the best place in the world to fail. He meant it literally. The Fire Phone was a disaster. Amazon auctions failed. Amazon restaurants failed. He did not treat those failures as scandals to be hidden. He treated them as the cost of doing business in the future. If you are not failing, he argued, you are not inventing. And if you are not inventing, you are already on day 2. The fourth lesson, and perhaps the quietest one, is the door desk. Long after Jeff Bezos could have furnished his offices with anything in the world, he kept the door desk. He made it a symbol, not of poverty or false modesty, but of something more precise. The conviction that resources should flow toward customers and invention, not toward comfort and signaling. Frugality, directed intelligently, is a form of focus. These are not easy lessons. They require you to think in years when the world thinks in weeks. They require you to absorb criticism without flinching. They require you to build systems that will matter long after the quarterly report is filed and forgotten. But here's the thing about Jeff Bezos that no one can take away from him. Whatever your view of his politics or his wealth or his choices, he saw something in 1994 that almost no one else could see. And then, instead of talking about it or writing a paper about it or waiting for conditions to be perfect, he drove across the country with a legal pad and a dream and built it anyway. The richest person in the world started with a $60 door. What are you waiting for? This has been Visionary Chronicles.